Stanford. I mean, so I think it just came to show that sometimes innovation and pivoting could be good for us as well.
Yeah, I think that so many of us have decided to embrace kind of a dual pronged approach from now on, being able to utilize this kind of technology, but I miss being with people.
Oh, sure. No, for sure. I think that everybody's kind of tired of Zoom anyways, but
yeah, Zoom fatigue is real.
Yeah.
As we go into a Zoom right now, I hope that it doesn't, yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter because I think a lot of people watch it later, which is just as valuable. I do a lot of those things. You know, sometimes I can't make it to something and I watch the recording later and it's valuable.
I agree. And we're live now, so.
We're live now.
What do you say?
Well, this is something I can say. I'm excited to say. We're just waiting, about 2-3 minutes to let people come on before we start our conversation. But I am excited to announce, I think the two of you already know that we are back in person for live services.
Yes.
So that is very exciting. I know it's last Shabbat was phenomenal, and the Shabbat before that was truly magical. It was very emotional to hear people say Shabbat Shalom back to you.
Oh,
I can't tell you, like, I wasn't expecting that emotion to overcome us, and to hear people say Amen to each other's prayers, especially for Mourner's Kaddish, it was beyond special. And but along those lines, everyone were also talking about how to embrace some of the technological aspects we've learned over quarantine, over the pandemic. Here's a great example of how we're embracing it. I believe this upcoming Shabbat, we have a father who's in our congregation, and he'll be sharing an aliyah with his daughter and son-in-law to be, who will be in New York. So they'll be on a screen on Zoom. He'll be in the sanctuary in Los Angeles. And this way, they can't be together right now. So this way they can share the moment with each other, and he is still live in person with all of us, and we can share the moment with him while he still shares the moment with his daughter. And son to be.
Well, the other thing I keep thinking about is the elderly who can't come to temple.
Still, right? Who can't in general, right? Who couldn't come before.
So
right.
Why shouldn't they not feel a part of the community and watch throughout the year? So
you're so correct. I didn't want you to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that's really astute, and I think it's a good idea to keep it going as much as possible for the people who can't show up, or for the people who maybe have moved away or whatever, but are still members. You know, I feel like our community is so far and wide now.
Very much so. I mean, something we had actually spoken about a long time ago was, how can we get our services into hospital rooms? For people who are hospitalized, or people who are in senior, like exactly what you were saying, kind of senior homes, and just actually unable to attend. How can we get our services continuously streamed? So now there's no question, it's there. So as hard as this has been, that has been a huge silver lining for us.
Beautiful.
For those people who are coming on, we welcome you. We're just, I think, I'm waiting for my cue, waiting one more minute so that we let everyone come in, if you will, settle in, grab your cup of tea or probably not coffee, up to you. And we'll start in just a few moments. Too late for me to have coffee, hot water.
You know that coffee does nothing. I can have coffee and go to sleep.
No way, really? I don't know. After about 6 p.m., I get a little nervous. Okay, I was just told we're ready. Although I'm sure we could go on about caffeine because it's one of my favorite topics. Coffee is one of my favorite topics. But I really am thrilled to be with Sabrina and Angella this evening. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce the two of them. But what I did not tell Angella and Sabrina yet is that this morning, I actually attended Brit Milah. I attended a bris in person. And it was one of the first smachot, one of the first celebrations that I've been to, if you will, post-surge. So kind of post-December through March here in Los Angeles. And the reason why I brought it up is because I know so many of us have the idea of re-entering the world on our mind and what the world will look like for us as we decide to return to work, return to our communities, return to synagogue, knowing that that place, whatever that is, has changed, but we've changed as well. And the reason why I bring this up is because as I left the bris thinking how happy I was to enter a space of Jewish ritual and celebration, and also feeling extremely fortunate and grateful that my particular position, some things haven't changed, just have been enhanced. I know that that's not necessarily the case for, it's not the case for women across the world at this very moment. And I came across just a quick excerpt I found in Fortune magazine. It was just from a month ago. And it was talking about the idea of a hope for return. And it says that a hope for a return to pre-pandemic levels of employment for women is still distant. Recent projections based on economic scenarios estimate that employment for women may not recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2024, 2 full years after recovery for men. And then it goes on to say, since the onset of the pandemic, 400,000 more women than men have left the workforce. So I bring that up as our start tonight because I'm thrilled to engage with 2 inspiring women that I think analyze and really process every day how to lift women up, how to create environments where women not only feel safe, but praised for their unique contributions to their families, to their communities. And often these 2 women, through their tireless efforts, motivate other women to discover an impact that often they thought previously impossible. And so it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Sabrina Merage Naim and Angella Nazarian. And I have a little bit of intro about each of you. Sabrina Merage Naim is an engaged and passionate philanthropist working toward making the world a more equitable and unified place. She founded the Sabrina Merage Foundation in 2008 with the intention of empowering initiatives and community leaders to create paradigm shifts that spark inclusivity between diverse society. Since then, Sabrina has focused much of her philanthropic efforts on uniting communities and paving the ways for individuals from diverse backgrounds to connect, teach, and learn from one another. Sabrina also founded Evoke Media as a subsidiary of SMF in order to further the foundation's mission of celebrating diversity, empowering women, and uniting humanity through storytelling in film, print media, and the original podcast, Breaking Glass. Sabrina co-hosts Breaking Glass, a series of intimate conversations with women around the world who are shattering glass ceilings and challenging social norms, with accomplished guests from dozens of countries discussing a wide range of topics that impact women everywhere. The show has been widely received as illuminating, poignant, and transcendent. Sabrina is also the founder and principal of Echo Capital Group, a venture capital firm focused on early stage investments in consumer product companies founded by young, driven entrepreneurs. Echo combines the insights of a young team with the experience of decades of operational know-how to develop exciting new concepts for today's consumer marketplace. Welcome to Sabrina.
Thank you.
Angella. Angella Nazarian is the bestseller author of 4 books, Life as a Visitor, Pioneers of the Possible, Celebrating Visionary Women of the World, and Visionary Women, and a newly released book, Creative Couples, that's on its 2nd printing. Angella is the co-founder of 2 nonprofits, Looking Beyond, an organization that raises awareness and funds for special need programs in hospitals in the Los Angeles area. And Sinai Temple has been a beneficiary of this wonderful organization. She's also the co-founder of Visionary Women, a nonprofit women's leadership organization in Los Angeles that brings together some of the most dynamic thought leaders in the country together for in-depth conversations with its members. To date, Visionary Women has raised approximately $2.5 million to benefit women and girls initiatives. Angella lives with her husband, David Nazarian, and has 2 sons. She's passionate about travel and flamenco dancing. And that is also something I love to see on your Instagram. I love that. So I'm thrilled to welcome both of you. And so Sabrina, if you'll start us off. First of all, I just hope everyone realizes we're in the presence of greatness. I hope you heard that not just through the bios that I read. I know you'll have a chance to hear it through the stories that we will share this evening. But it is really an honor to be with the 2 of you tonight. So thank you so much for coming. Sabrina, why don't you start us off? Share with us a little bit about the vision and the impetus in creating the podcast, Breaking Glass.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having us. It's exciting to have this conversation. Breaking Glass came from the understanding and idea that after 13 years of traditional philanthropy, where I was sitting on boards and donor to nonprofit organizations for a variety of causes and a variety of reasons, that the work we were doing there was multi-generational in scope. The changes and shifts that we were looking to make will hopefully impact my children, maybe my grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And that is incredibly important work and work that I continue. But I was feeling a little antsy and wanting to see some more immediate impact. And so I started Evoke Media with the idea that investing in media opportunities and specific documentaries would be a really exciting way to kind of show that my passion, bridge my passion for certain social impact issues with an opportunity to be on the screen in your face right away for potentially millions of people and a much broader audience. So we invest in documentaries that have real social grounding and are in a variety of countries and all over the world. And as part of that, something that I really I have been kind of eager to focus on for a long time was women's empowerment and women's issues, and something that I'm very passionate about. But I didn't really know exactly how to do it. I didn't know what my entree would be. And it kind of became a natural fit that I wanted to, the understanding that storytelling is so powerful, that storytelling provides an opportunity for empathy, for knowledge and awareness and appreciation of experiences of women all over the world and the things that bring us together versus what keeps us apart. So having a podcast that was a platform, really kind of a means to an end, to be able to host these conversations with incredible people who are really pushing gender boundaries in their respective societies and families, communities, religion, whatever, even in their workplace, whatever that may be. And the topics range vastly, is something that has been very inspiring for me. And I have learned a tremendous amount, including from guests like Angella. And I'm so grateful that people are willing and have a desire to come on and tell us their stories and kind of bring their insights and experiences to these conversations. So it's been really exciting, much more work than I thought. Because frankly, you'd think everyone and their mother has a podcast right now. Like, what's so difficult about it? But I really wanted it to be very a quality, like well-produced program, and doing so takes effort. And it's something that I've been very happy to put my time and resource into.
So can you share with us just a little bit more about, give us examples in terms of the range of speakers, when you make that determination, who you're going to bring onto the show, what kinds of goals you have in mind, selection process. Give us some of those highlights.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I realized not so long ago, having a conversation with some of my girlfriends, that every topic we naturally touched on, just as women in modern day society, I was like, oh, we have an episode about that, and oh, we have an episode about that, and we, the topics that we want to touch on are topics that are so relatable for all of us. And what ended up happening was the idea of like wanting to create a platform for women to share their stories and to be inspired about how to lift each other up in different ways and push beyond the boundaries really quickly turned into this recognition that the diversity of, regardless of the amazing diverse individuals on the show and the experiences that they have, the common threads were the things that kept popping up. Things like, sheer stubbornness, right? Like so many of our guests talk about everyone, growing up, this is what I wanted to do. And everyone around me told me I couldn't do it. So I was determined to prove them wrong. And these are the women that, became titans of industry and I can tell you, just a few examples. Our guests heard things like, girls can't play the drums, or girls shouldn't get educated, or girls can't be doctors, or girls can't be with other girls, or girls can't kayak class 5 rivers. And what that turned into was, oh, I can't play the drums. I'm going to practice every single day until I'm so good that Stevie Wonder discovers me and I'm going to become a music industry icon. And that's Tina Clark. Wow. I can't be a doctor. I'm going to become the Minister of Health for Rwanda and completely change the healthcare system of an entire country. And that's Dr. Agnes Binagwaho. And by the way, Rwanda now has the highest rates of vaccinations of any country in the world. I'm too small or petite to be a kayaker on a class 5 river. I'm going to be the first person to kayak the Amazon River from source to sea. And that is a 5-month excursion into some of the most dangerous jungle in the history, in the entire world. And that's Darcy Gector. We have women from all over the world, literally all kind of countries and every industry that you can imagine, talking about the challenges that they had to overcome to get to where they are. And sometimes, by the way, we're talking to survivors of sex trafficking, of abuse, of kidnapping and sexual assault, who then had to completely turn their lives around to help others, Sabrina,
can I just ask you something?
Yeah, absolutely.
2 things. First of all, if anyone has questions, anyone who's watching has questions, please feel free to put the question in the chat. And one of our administrators will send me the questions so that we can filter them in. In your examples, though, I'm just wondering if you could touch upon, are these incredible women coming to you? Are you doing research finding them? How do you find each other?
Yeah, it's more the latter, and I would say it's based on, there's 2 ways that we find our guests. One is incredible women that we either know of or come across that we feel like would be great guests, great examples of inspiring stories, of renegades, of whatever that we feel like we could learn a lot from. And then the second is more topic specific. This is the topic that we want to drill into, and we need to find someone who can really speak to us about that. And I can give you the example of, recently we had a conversation with a sociologist in Tokyo, because we wanted to learn why the suicide rates in Japan among women are exponentially higher this past year than any other year in history. Yes, some of that is, it's obvious that it's COVID related, but what is actually feeding into that? And so we needed to have a conversation with the sociologist. We went kind of searching through our network, who knows someone who really understands this topic, who can, connect us. So sometimes it's guest focused and sometimes it's topic focused.
And why don't you share a little bit, if you will, about your connection with Angella?
Yes, absolutely. So I was aware of Angela. We know each other's families, but we didn't really know each other that well. And I was aware of kind of visionary women and the work that she was doing there. And it felt like such a natural fit for me to reach out to her and say, hey, do you know anyone who would be a good guest for this podcast? And right away, she was so generous in responding and opening her network with ideas, with thoughts, with introductions, which really blew me away, because it's not so often that we see, especially among, almost strangers, that kind of generosity of opening your network. But she really it felt to me like she really got it right away. And, there are a few other guests on the show who were thanks to her connections and her introductions. And eventually I was like, look, I really want to speak with you. You're also an expert on women's issues. You have a whole career behind you and in front of you of working as a professor in psychology and with these women's groups, in your philanthropy, with your books. It felt like a very natural fit. And she agreed. And I love the conversation we had.
I really enjoyed it, Sabrina.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you agreed. So absolutely.
One thing I want to add, first of all, I want to say when Rabbi Guzik is saying she's amongst greatness, she herself is an incredible, incredible leader. Not only her warmth, her intelligence, her compassion comes through. But what I also love is that she has been very courageous in going and discovering her skills as a. Have you announced it actually, Rabbi Guzik, or am I spilling the beans?
No, you're not spilling the beans. No, it's not like a secret.
But the fact that I see that a rabbi is also getting trained in psychology and psychotherapy, I think it's. This is like the wave of the future, to be multidisciplinary, to be able, just like Sabrina is talking about how she's using documentaries and then her podcast and her voice towards one mission, which is impacting others. You do that with your skills as well. And if I have to say there's something that really comes across my encounters with really special women is that they learn how to hold space. They learn how to tell the stories of other people. It's not about them. It's about how do they hold space so that the most effective means of communication comes through and affects other people. And that I see in your work, Rabbi Guzik, and I see it in your work, I was going to say Mirage, but because I've known you from your maiden name. But Sabrina, I wanted to say that this is what we need. If we wanted to talk about women's empowerment, it's really about understanding yourself first and foremost. You cannot empower other people if you don't know who you are at the very core. And when you dip into that wellspring of your own talents, you'll see how easily and how fun relating to other people on a level that intersects your passions and what you want to do in life.
And I just want to add that I think that was one of the unique aspects of Angela's episode is so many of the other guests that we have are speaking of their own experiences. And that to a certain extent, it was true of Angela also, but part of her work that is something that we really wanted to dive into was women empowering other women. We were talking about how she is holding that space, we were talking about how she has been able to kind of throw the ladder behind her to lift others up and to bring a community together, the importance of having a community of women, which frankly is something that we know that as women, we need that support, that resource, that camaraderie. And And so that was something that we really dove into a lot. And I want to just kind of acknowledge one more time that having the wisdom and generosity to open your knowledge, your network, and your experience is something that I think, you know, one of the topics that you talked about in the podcast was around cross-generational dialogue and engagement. And that stuck with me a lot, was the idea of across multiple generations, we need to be able to have more dialogue on the needs of women to push issues forward that impact women, our experiences in our past and our hopes for our future. And I think that that will enable us to stop kind of trying to recreate the wheel over and over again and hit our heads against the wall. So I would like, if you guys are both amenable, to just play a clip from Angella's episode as a little teaser.
Great.
I don't think we can hear it.
No, not yet.
It worked when we...
I always say, if you want to go fast somewhere, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you have to go with people. So in anything that I try to do where I feel that I want to have lasting change, I'm all for sharing the project with as many smart, capable people as possible, because they're going to be at the same time supporting my vision. And my vision is for a better women's community, period.
Oof.
Yeah, I picked that clip out of a much longer episode because I think it really just epitomizes who Angela is and what I appreciate so much about her, which is what you were saying, holding space, sharing your vision, sharing your work, because we're all going to win if we do that more.
I mean, it's so funny, Sabrina, that that was the kind of 30 seconds you chose. Because Angela, first of all, thank you so much for the words that you shared. I take it to heart. Thank you. I want to say this delicately, but I don't always find that women are as generous with each other. And it's interesting how you put it, Angela, that it takes a real sense of self to be able to lift someone else up, really knowing yourself, and then creating the space to lift up someone else's story. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more. If you could speak to that in terms of the work you've done, the organizations you've created. I mean, it's so fascinating that you say, I thought that this was quite poignant, that you look forward to sharing a project with others because you know they'll support your vision. But how do you know? And I guess, how do you know, and how do you find those women? So I'm just going to kind of toss that, because I'm sure many people at home are thinking to themselves, gosh, I actually know a lot of, let's just be honest, I know a lot of vicious women, and I'm really looking for that support.
Well, you know,
start there.
Yeah, you know, Madeleine Albright has a very famous quote saying that there's a special place in hell for all those women that don't support each other.
Oh, so, really? Is that,
yeah.
That's, wow.
And it comes to show, well, for one thing, I want to say something.
Maybe just freezing for a second, hopefully.
That is a hindrance for all of us. I'm going to repeat that because maybe we
got frozen also for a second. Okay, great.
For a lot of women, they've been raised with a scarcity model for power, for influence, and feeling that there isn't enough airspace for them to speak, to have influence, to make things happen, or even get attention. And that scarcity model pits us against each other, saying, well, if Sabrina has a good thing, then that means that I have less of it. Why? Like, there's plenty for everyone. And if anything, what we do see, and I'm a big believer that whatever you give out, it'll come to you in different ways. And it's not that it's for benefit, it's that we are here as a group to build community. Okay, whether it's Sinai Temple, whether it's through Sabrina's podcast or through Visionary Women or Looking Beyond or whatever I'm doing. I think what we have seen so often, and as a matter of fact, we're having a professor that recently spoke at KCRW. It's called The Lonely Century, saying that how with every decade that has gone by, people are feeling lonelier, more isolated. And the antidote to that is actually being more inclusive. The antidote to that is building community and seeing how we can link up to one another. Do you think, I don't think I'm a magnet for getting talented people, but I do think that if you work from a place of authenticity, where you're very direct, I'm a very direct person. All my family members and friends can say that. I try to be as honest as possible, and I'm very enthusiastic for my work. So, and I think that I've been a pretty good judge of character. So sometimes I've made mistakes, but that doesn't mean that the other person was bad. It's just not a good fit. But I think that one of the things that I learned through research with the women that I did for my books is that true leaders, especially women, there's a kind of, and I talked about this to Sabrina as well on the show, there's a two-pronged approach. One is that you have to be very good at connecting with people. So that's very important, because that's how you get people to even understand your vision. But at the same time, you have to be okay with disapproval or not getting approval all the time. That is that very interesting dichotomy there, that both you should be very socially aware, but not so socially dependent on people. After all, if you want to make things, change things, you're going to get criticism from others, or some people are going to be rubbed the wrong way, but you have to also believe in what you're doing at a much deeper level.
We actually have a question. Oh, Sabrina, you want to jump in, and then we have a question.
I did just want to touch on the fact that we did very specifically ask Angella about this, because you're right. The one thing that comes to mind is that women don't always support each other. There's this pervasive culture of women cutting each other down. And I thought that Angella's response on the show was actually very poignant, which is that it comes from a history, right? There's a history for why this exists. It's not just innate in us that we would be born to cut each other down. There was a scarcity of opportunity in the workplace, and for a lot of different opportunities, that there were only a few positions at the top, and so women had to step all over each other to try and get there. And something that I'm really trying to communicate through this work is that is now a myth. Like, be done, right? It is a myth to believe that if I'm the one woman at the top, then I'm the winner. It is a myth to believe that if I step on everyone else to get there, then I've done well. Because we know through years of research that it takes more than one woman at the top to be effective, to be productive, that having two women at the table or multiple women at the table creates significant more, problem-solving skills, empathy, just frankly, your bottom line changes dramatically. So opening up the opportunities for a larger funnel of women and then supporting each other in that endeavor is what really is going to make all of us win together versus the one lonely woman at the top.
It is such a fascinating perspective. I had never thought about it from that kind of psychological perspective, that basically, women as a group experienced, if you will, historical trauma. And now we are working through that healing, we're working through that healing process, but we don't, honestly, I didn't really think about it in that lens until this conversation. And one of the ways to work through that historical trauma is exactly what the two of you are discussing. It's realizing what it means to see someone else's value. It's not sabotaging someone else's future in order to prop up yours. It's understanding how someone else's story holds so much commonality and so much value and greater benefit to the whole. I didn't look at it in terms of a traumatic experience that we've actually shared together. Such an interesting perspective. I want to throw out this question. I think it's an excellent question from Michal Morris on Facebook. She says, lifespans are increasing, yet women professionals experience much ageism as they get older. Despite their experience and cumulative wisdom, we take care of the younger regarding things like empowerment. But what about the other end?
I have something I want to jump in and talk about this. I think one of the things that really came through, I guess a year and a half ago, at Visionary Women, we had Gloria Steinem come and speak. And okay, this woman, she was 80 years old, wearing tight leather black pants, looking so badass, you won't believe it. And what was crazy is that we had 600 people come and show up, and we had mothers with their daughters and some young mothers with like their 8-year-old, 9-year-old daughters. And she started talking about ageism, and it was very true. I mean, of course, she's had the privilege of being a leader for most of her adult life, so people give her a lot of respect. But one thing that she said was that how important it is. Before, when we were a tribal community, the elders were the keepers of wisdom and experience, and we no longer are with them. And how important it is actually to have people who are much older be paired up with the people that are very, very young, because at those two edges of the continuum, that's where you're closest to the mystery and how much they learn from one another. And as a result of that talk, what we wanted to do at Visionary Women is actually have dine-arounds where we had a high school girl, someone in their midlife, and an older woman, but you know, a good mix, coming for dinner and coming and talking about things that occupy their minds, that occupy their lives, so they can see how each one will have a different perspective that would be appreciated. And I think that's how we can use our platform, whether it's through a conversation on a podcast or Sinai Temple or Visionary Women, is that I think one of our roles in the future is actually how do we make our organizations as multi-generational as possible?
Yeah, I think that's such a smart thing to do. And again, to Angella's point in the episode about multi-generational dialogue, which I took to heart really. And it's something that, you know, we had a guest, Pat Mitchell, who's Gloria Steinem's very good friend. I know that Visionary Women also had her in their summit for International Women's Day. She is this incredible powerhouse of a woman from the media industry, also a writer. And one of the things that she said is, older women are not to be underestimated, are not to be cast aside. These women are among now the largest demographic, who have a ton of power and resource, and the wisdom, I think, is the most important to touch on. Young women are cast aside because they're clueless. Older women are cast aside because they're irrelevant. Neither of those things are true. Having more of that multi-generational diet, like I relish in being able to learn from people like Pat Mitchell and Gloria Steinem and Angella Nazarian. I relish in that. But if we don't have the opportunity to be able to have conversations like this, then those kinds of cultural stigmas deepen, right? I think it's just really important to keep having these types of discussions and not brush aside younger women because they don't have the experience, and not brush aside older women because they're in their, you know, older years of life. It's it's ridiculous. It's irrelevant.
No, it's such an interesting theme to think as we, like I said at the beginning, re-enter this world and kind of re-enter and reshape the communities we want to be a part of. I mean, it's something that we're consciously thinking about at Sinai Temple. We have this wonderful opportunity, if you will. You know, people are starting to come back to the synagogue for the first time in a very long time. High Holy Days, I'm quite cognizant that people are coming back to a sanctuary space, a space that they have probably not been in for 2 years. And these kinds of themes are it should be the foundation in which we choose to rebuild. No longer, at least not across the board, siloed communities, but rather what is it that we can learn from each other at other ends of the spectrum. So I appreciate both of your responses. I would like to speak a little bit more, if we can, about women in the pandemic. As I started, women are falling so behind, because already we're behind, but are falling so behind because of the past year and a half, women working from home, taking the leave of absence because of homeschooling children, and finding many barriers upon their attempts to re-enter the world that they once knew. So I'm curious about your forecast for women post-COVID, your forecast, and how do you think women will catch up?
Well, they're saying that what we call this is a she session. So a recession for women, especially. Because most of them had to let go of their work to do what most people didn't realize, is that also going to school is a great way of not only learning, but having your kids being taken care of so you can actually go to work.
That's right.
So a lot of women had to just stop work or leave their work to take care of family. And re-entering is a very difficult task. Do I know what does it take? And I think it's not going to be an easy bounce back. Research shows that any woman that leaves a workspace, it takes them twice as long as they expected to re-enter again. And so we do have to be cognizant of that. I think one of the things that is actually interesting for more highly educated women is that I think there's a lot of policy that's being passed for women to be now, like most of the boards are now mandating that a woman is on a board, that they're mandating diversity. So maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see more of that trickling into the workplace. But I don't know what we need to do after the pandemic to get people back to where they were before.
This is something that has popped up as a theme among many of our recent episodes, because it is impacting women everywhere, and it's much more challenging for women and for women of color. So we had a conversation with Jeffrey Tobias Halter, a man who has focused his entire career now on gender equity in corporate America. And we asked him about this, and the kind of stat that you gave, Rabbi Guzik, of it taking 4 years versus the 2 years to get back to pre-pandemic numbers of women back in the workplace, doesn't take into the account the decades of clawing our way up the corporate ladder in corporate America to try and slowly become equal with our male counterparts, which we're still not, right? And so the incredible kind of the pushback that this is going to cause for women will erase, some people say it will erase decades of progress for women. I will also say we had another conversation with a woman who specializes in reentry, after having a break on your resume, Carol Fishman Cohen. She gave us some really, really good tips on what you should be doing if you're on a break to make sure that your reentry into the workforce is much more seamless. And it was a great conversation, very tactical tools that women can use. But the other thing to your question is, I think a lot of what we don't focus on is the double shift that we call the double shift of women being mothers at home and also having to work. And that is incredibly mentally and physically trying. We have our kids home now. Hopefully they're going back to school soon. We don't know, but for a year, kids were home on Zoom. They may be behind in terms of, their schooling. They're acting out because they're antsy. You're having to try and figure out work if you can, or you're home, you're taking care of the kid, whatever. All of this is incredibly trying. And I think it's just really important at this point that we kind of acknowledge and appreciate the incredible pressures that we're under, and then we take care of ourselves a little bit more and understand and accept that right now is a much more challenging time than usual, and do whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves.
I mean, that very much speaks to me, and speaks, I know, to so many of the stories of women who are listening right now, congregants I've been speaking to over the past year, and certainly so many news blasts about women being exhausted, mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted. And on the smallest level, I don't know if it's smallest, but at least in terms of what we can do for each other, I think it's so important as we do re-enter our communities, not to expect that kind of immediate bounce back from our female peers, and to offer that lens of empathy and compassion, and realize that other mother that's standing in front of us, or that woman who's in front of us in line, they most likely experienced a very common story that I have, or at least a piece of my story, and not to dismiss this past year, and just to expect that the word resilience has actually been a little bit difficult for me to hear, that we keep expecting people to be so resilient, and to remember that resilience doesn't necessarily mean jumping right back into a world that once was. So I think it's adding that lens.
Rabbi Guzik, my question to you is that, did you get many more phone calls from people who wanted to confide in you, or that they were sharing? A lot of people say there's more incidences of family, discord, all kinds of things going on at home as well. But did you have a lot of people calling in to you?
It's funny because I don't know if you and I have spoken about this yet, and I don't think I've shared with Sabrina, but it's actually one of the reasons why we are launching what's called the Sinai Temple Mental Health Center, starting in June. We have found over the course of this year a tremendous amount of phone calls. Everything that we've described in this episode, by the way, from women and men: loneliness, depression, anxiety, unemployment, very many concerns about finances, wondering if they'll be accepted when they come back, parents of children who have missed their both senior year of high school and freshman year of college. Of course, as a congregation, we had so many families experiencing B'nai Mitzvah through Zoom at home, to which I will say they experienced very meaningful bar and bat mitzvah Shabbat celebrations. And yet so many kids and families didn't realize the kinds of expectations they had put on a moment, and the disappointments that they would harbor both before and after. And then, of course, the biggest of all is the sense of mourning. In the Jewish community, we mourn together, right? We stand together for Kaddish. We experience Shiva together. We embrace each other after a funeral. And the amount of isolation in a religion where we're not meant to be isolated, that poured in phone calls where I don't know how to cope. The rituals are so different. It's not what I expected. It's not what I need. And so we are very cognizant. We're talking about this global pandemic, and I'm sure the two of you would agree as well that, we're already in it, a mental health pandemic to follow, certainly the next 3 to 5 years. So Sinai Temple is being proactive in that stance. And we're building an infrastructure, like I said at the beginning, in which to welcome back our congregants in the healthiest way possible. So a very sad, disheartening reality, to which we're hoping to provide a little bit of light as we I don't know where the end of the tunnel is. I don't know if anyone knows where the end is, but at least as we're walking through.
But I think it's important that you guys are trying to be proactive about offering resources and acknowledging the need, because I think it really is, it exists and it's serious. And I can tell you personally, one of the reasons why I started the podcast, which I didn't mention before, was my need to connect with women around the world and to hear their stories in otherwise an incredibly isolating time where I am sitting at my computer by myself with my microphone.
Ooh, that's a good setup.
Yeah, exactly. On the screen, and I'm not seeing anyone, and I'm not talking to a lot of people, and I needed to have that feeling, that sense of global camaraderie and inspiration to be able to feel like it wasn't just an entire waste of a year of my life. And frankly, for me, it worked, and I've heard from other people that having that opportunity to hear these stories has been really incredible for them as well. But we all need to find that thing,
Right.
Hit factor that makes us feel like we're progressing.
Sabrina, could you tell us what's to come? Kind of are you allowed to share that with us?
Yeah.
I know I didn't ask before, but I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of a sneak preview.
Sure. Let me bring up the list, because I have this master episode list. So we have this incredible woman from Sierra Leone, Aminata Conte Bijour, who now lives in Australia, who during the civil war in Sierra Leone was kidnapped, was assaulted sexually and otherwise for 7 months of her life before escaping, going to Australia, starting a new life, getting married. And then because of her own very challenging birth of her first daughter, realized that maternal health is so important. Having resource and funds specifically back in her home country of Sierra Leone, because it has one of the worst rates of maternal and child mortality in the world. She is incredible. We have a woman named Carly Lloyd, who is a professional volleyball player who got fired because she got pregnant.
Wow.
And the fallout of that. Chrissy Powers, who grew up in the evangelical church with the idea of purity culture and shame around sexuality, pleasure, your body, and how she now, as a family therapist, is kind of deconstructing her childhood to be able to be more in her body, and how she's going to do things differently for her kids. So some really good things coming.
Wow. Tell us how we find your podcast.
Yes, it's called Breaking Glass. It is on Apple Podcasts. It's on Google Play. It's on Spotify. It's on Pandora. All you have to do is search for it, or you can go to weareevokemedia.com, find it there, as well as our documentaries that we invest in. I really hope that you guys listen and enjoy, give feedback. This is an ongoing project, and it's definitely a passion project of mine.
Incredible. Angela, can you give us also a little sneak preview, a little bit more? Is Angela there? Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I'm here.
I couldn't tell if it froze for a second. A little bit more about what's on the horizon for looking beyond the visionary women.
Well,
I know what just happened, so maybe share a little bit with that.
Yeah, one of the things, looking beyond is
Hopefully it's just glitchy for a second, I think.
Thrilled to say that we raised over $200,000 without having any event at all,
Wow.
which makes me very happy, and everyone else. And we've had a great chairperson, Evelyn Shoshani. And we're going to have our raffle and silent auction coming up. So please look up Looking Beyond and participate. And again, all this money goes to special needs programs. In terms of visionary women, we were very lucky that we used the pandemic as a pivoting point for us. And as I was explaining earlier, just before the Zoom, that we had a summit for International Women's Day that was watched by people in 44 countries, and we hope to expand that for next year. We had great speakers, and the program is on our website. On June 3rd, we are having Dr. Norina Hertz, who wrote The Lonely Century, speak about this whole pandemic of loneliness that she said started really actually in the 1980s and has grown to epidemic levels. And she compared loneliness to the effects of loneliness is as if you're smoking 10 cigarettes a day. This is how bad it is for your health.
Wow.
Really, and she was talking about how 1 in 5 millennials say they don't even have one friend. They don't have one friend. And some colleges are having classes where kids are going to learn how to read people's faces because they're not used to, they're on the computer, on social media. So they're actually, this has all been researched by professors. So I think that's a very interesting topic. And we're going to be collaborating with UCLA Hospital and Cedars-Sinai on this topic, so that I think one of the things that we'd like to do in the future is bring in as many organizations as possible that could benefit from the conversation, and we'll host it and have their communities join us. I think we're going to plan, we have some big names coming up, but I did something very courageous on Sabrina's podcast. I'm like, I'm throwing it out there. I want Madeleine Albright and Condoleezza Rice, and it happened. But
it happened
because for 2 months I was thinking, why did I say that? Now everybody's going to ask me about it.
Oh my gosh! Well, you put it out there in the world, and
I was gonna mention that because it was such a good lesson for me that she came with the confidence and the visualization that she was putting that energy into the universe. And then she did it. She had Madeleine Albright in conversation with Condoleezza Rice at the International Women's Day Summit for Visionary Women. And by the way, it was incredible. And I was like watching like a little fangirl. I was so excited because Angella said that on our show months before. And it was a risk, but you had the confidence to proclaim something, and then you made it happen.
And of course, I had the help of all our board members and my co-founder and everyone else that comes to cheer me on, and we do it all together. It's always a team effort. But sometimes I do think it's important for us to put ourselves out there a little bit.
Yeah.
Announcing something sometimes gives us the extra push to go. And I think now I'm getting a little spiritual, but it's like when you announce something, you're actually saying, I'm ready to manifest it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to manifesting it and working it and telling everyone. So, okay, I'm going to announce then.
Please.
Okay,
great.
I think
you heard it here first, everyone. Go ahead.
I mean, Lily and I, Lily Bossi, who's the co-founder of Visionary Women and my best friend, and I have been thinking about this for a long time, and we want to get either Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle.
Oh, Glennon Doyle is on my dream list.
Yes, on mine.
And I also announced Glennon Doyle.
Let's do it.
Could it possibly be a, try partnership here. Like,
Yeah.
does that
I love
sound?
it. I just finished reading her book Untamed, and it was phenomenal. So I would love it. I'll partner with you, Angela. 100%. Let's do it.
Okay,
Okay,
Sinai
you heard
Temple
it here,
is
everyone. You heard it.
Sinai Temple is more than in. Happy to host.
Yes.
Happy to host.
And you know another person on my wish list, and it was first at Sinai Temple that I saw him, and then later on I had the distinct pleasure of having lunch with 30 women with him, was the Dalai Lama.
Oh, he's incredible.
Wow, that's amazing.
And you know, he has a whole thing on women's empowerment and how women are the key holders to bringing peace and also awareness, not only in their communities, but in their families and the environment. So wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, he's really something else.
Yes.
Well, I just want to thank the two of you so much. I want to end tonight in a way with how we started. How often it is that we view women as people who tear each other down, and what the two of you are doing in your personal lives, in your professional lives, in your spiritual lives. You lead by example, and you show that by lifting another woman up, it's just creating a greater good for humanity. And to live with that kind of perspective not only shows the open hearts that you both have, but it also inspires others to realize that they can open up their hearts as well. So I just want to thank you personally. Thank you on behalf of Sinai Temple. And I'm just so excited to continue to follow the two of you and learn. And from what I learn, continue to teach. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that concludes our program, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. And I hope that you got all of the information you needed in order to follow Breaking Glass, to follow Looking Beyond and Visionary Women. And we thank you for attending.
Bye.